In this interview, I meet up with Nathalie LeFave. Nathalie uses her knowledge and training in rapid transformational therapy, Huna energy healing, and forest yoga to assist others in working through their mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual blocks. She believes that everyone can express their greatest purpose in life if they are willing to release past trauma, fear, or pain that limits their potential. She also homeschools her 3 boys. Let's welcome Nathalie. Thank you so much for coming in today and doing this interview with me.
Thank you, Kahila.
I wanted to start by asking you, you are a transformational therapy practitioner, right? And
Yes.
why is it this method perfect to free physical, mental, and emotional pain?
Well, this therapy we deal with what we call the subconscious mind. And to give you a little bit of an explanation, the subconscious mind is the part of your mind that holds all your memories from the time you were in the womb until now.
Mm.
And what happens to us as adults, whatever issue we have today, usually stems from what happened in our childhood, the environment we grew up in, right? And so as children, the first 7 years of life, from 0 to 7, we live in a state of hypnosis where, that's why we say, if you want your child to learn to ride the bike, to play the piano, to learn different languages, when they're that little, that's the time to start, because they're like sponge. Their brain are like sponges. And why is that? Is because their brain waves around 0 and 7, that period of time, is what we call in theta brain waves, meaning that that's the time where the human brain is downloading information, just like your computer system has programming in it that has been downloaded. Well, the human brain between 0 and 7 is in a download form. And so that's why our child learns by looking at mom and dad. How do we eat? How do we take a bath? How do we ride a bike? Learning how to read, learning how to write, all of that, right? Learning your ABCs. So that happens within that 7 years of life. And so now we go back to address what is it that happened in your childhood that affects you now as an adult. So for example, people come to me and say, oh, I'm depressed, or I have anxiety about certain things, or I have a fear of whatever it is. And usually what happens is that fear or the anxiety, it's about past beliefs that a child has acquired, when they were little. And so with rapid transformational therapy, it's a combination of hypnotherapy, of, cognitive behavioral therapy, and neurolinguistic programming. And so we access that part of your brain that know the cause, the reason, the why you feel a certain way today. And it's very quick, because once we ask the subconscious, what is it that's causing you to have certain beliefs about yourself? Like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not confident, or I'm this, or I'm that. Your brain, your subconscious brain that we can access with RTT, will come up with the information. And then once you understand where the pain comes from, where the cause of your pain, the root of your pain comes from, then I help you reframe the meaning that you've put to certain circumstances in your childhood. Because as a child, you can only behave as a child, right? A child, between 0 and 7, or even a little bit older, doesn't really have the tools like we do as adults to deal with whatever is going on. So, and the child will, put certain meaning in order to survive, actually, because a child needs to survive. So it will come up with a meaning, but the meaning that served us when we were children so that we can survive any situation that happened, as adults, it's actually a hindrance most of the time. Because now as adult, we know, we understand so much, we can logically think for ourselves, we have tools, and so we can reframe those things, those meanings, and that's what I help people do, reframe them, and also rewire your brain with the beliefs, the set of beliefs that you want now as an adult to empower you to be free in your life, doing whatever you want, being confident to public speak, right? Being confident as a parent that you can raise your children in a very loving and compassionate way, even if maybe your childhood wasn't like that. But as an adult, you can do differently than what happened in the past.
Yeah.
So that's what, in a nutshell, rapid transformational
Wow.
therapy does.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It is very powerful. You know, I've worked with an area of issues coming from clients, and you know, most of the time, once the client understand why they're feeling this way, then once you understand why, you cannot go back to the old.
No, no. You're
Then
aware of
you're empowered, you know, to do differently. And even when you're triggered, because triggers are part of our daily human life, when you're triggered, you actually understand where you're going, you know, what are you thinking, what you're doing that is not in alignment of what you want. And you no longer let the trigger keep you in the past, because that's what a trigger does. It takes you in the past, and it brings up all the emotions that you've experienced. So when you're triggered now, once you've done that work, you actually can understand, oh, I'm being triggered because of this. And I'm no longer going to repeat my past behaviors, because now I know what to do to get me out of this.
out of this. Is
Right?
there an age, starting age that you can do this kind of therapy, or doesn't
You
matter?
work with children
Yeah.
as young, as 4 or 5 years old, and to, you know, to adults.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but with children, they're not used like developed, right? So what?
So in children, say they are below that 7-year-old mark, you no longer, you don't have to actually you know, access the information. You can just ask them questions, because they are in that theta brain waves already. You just ask them the questions and they'll come up. And we know children always speak their truth, right?
Yes.
They will not hold back. So and you help children look at things differently. I've worked with my own children. You know, I have 3 boys now. They are 6, 10, and 12, and I've worked with all 3 of them.
Nice.
And it's been powerful to see already, like with my older one, for instance, where, you know, he's put meaning to certain things when he was only 5 years old. He was, you know, he did competitive swimming before the COVID stuff, right? And sometimes he have anxiety about trying a
Race.
new race or whatever that he hasn't done, because, you know, as they compete more and more, they do longer distance races, right? And we went back to understand why is it that you feel nervous, right? And it goes back to an event when he was 5 years old and had a birthday party. And he was shy because that was his first big birthday party. And what happened and how he used that, I'm not going to go into details, but how he used that event and what went on in the event, even if it wasn't nothing really negative, he put a meaning to it. And now whenever he goes into situations where it's new, well, guess what? His brain is reminding him of the event when he was 5 years old. And so I help him reframe that. And, you know, even with clients, I always tell them, if you're feeling nervous, your brain doesn't understand or doesn't know the difference. If you're nervous or you're excited, right? You still have the butterflies going on, which is normal feeling that's coming up for you because it's the unknown, right?
Mhm.
But you need to tell your brain, instead of saying, oh, I'm so nervous to do this race, tell your mind, I'm so excited to try this new race, right? And when you can shift that, then you no longer become a victim. Instead, you're becoming empowered,
Yeah.
to try this new thing that you've never done before.
Very, very, very cool. That's
Yeah.
amazing that even kids can get.
Yeah. And I think the earlier you do this work with kids, then they don't have to grow up with the baggage like you and I carried until later on in life. And then we have to now work through that, right? We can
Very,
easily access what is causing them to feel a certain way.
yeah, very, very, very interesting. I love it what you're saying. So I wanted to ask you, how do we all have our childhood experiences, right? Our beliefs, our values. How does that affect us as a parent to our kids? Those things come up when we're parenting, right? Yeah.
Yes, because you know what? Having children, I think all parents will agree with that. Children's brings up a lot of our triggers, right? How
Mhm.
many days can you go through your day and say, oh, my child never triggered me throughout this whole day?
Yeah.
Most likely it's never, right?
Yeah.
And if you have multiple kids on top of that, you're going to get triggered at some point during the day, which is normal. But understand that all these triggers comes from our own unmet needs, right? So when children are growing up, they rely on parents,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we need to be there for them. We need to physically nourish them, emotionally nourish them,
Mhm.
and give them this foundation for them to thrive, right? So there's different set of needs that needs to be met as a child, right?
Mhm.
The first two most important one is attachment, meaning feeling the love of the parent. We know today if a baby is born and there's no attachment from the parent, that baby can die
Mhm.
more so than it if it didn't get food.
Mhm.
So that's one. And the second one is about being able to be authentic in this world, being who we are.
Mhm.
But what happens is because, we learn from our own parents, what's been passed on, what they've learned, how to parent. And so a lot of things has been passed on to us. And when we grew up ourselves, certain needs hasn't been met. Okay, so there are certain voids, and that's why later on in life, when our children, I could give you a perfect example for me is what triggered me when my kids were very little is when they are they're eating, right, at 1, 2 years old. And you know how
Mhm.
infants are, there's a big mess, right?
Mhm.
Because they're just learning. And that used to trigger me.
Mhm.
I used to get really upset when there was huge mess, and I didn't have to think about it. I would just get upset, right?
Mhm.
And then I had to ask myself, okay, what is this all about?
Mhm.
Right? Why is this triggering me so much?
Mhm.
And when I asked this question, because I've done a lot of work on myself too, is I understood that was, when I was a child, you know, my parents didn't like to see messes. So I was punished as a child for making messes.
Yes.
And now when my own child make mess, well, then it takes me to the past. It
Yeah.
reminds me of, that I wasn't able to make a mess. So why should I let you make a mess? Right?
Mhm.
There's a kind of thoughts that were going on in the background. That's the subconscious again, the
Yeah.
programming that happened when I was little, right? That affects me now with my own children. So understand that every triggers that comes from your own children
Yeah.
is because of our own unmet needs,
Wow.
because there's a wound that's open. How many times, if we go to a supermarket,
Mhm.
And suddenly our child or children have tantrums,
Yes.
right? And as mothers, we're so conscious of that. We're like, oh no, like you have to be quiet, or we'll walk out because we're thinking, okay, look at all the other people. They're looking at me and they don't like to hear screaming. And I would say now, knowing that I know, right? It's like, don't worry about the other people.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of your child. Your child is having a tantrum because
Yeah.
there's something that they need in the moment that they're not getting. Either they're tired or they're hungry
Mm-hmm.
or they need to tell you something that they don't know how to express yet, right? Instead of, being so worried about what others think. And I always now tell even my clients, I said, if somebody is bothered and triggered by your child screaming in the store or anywhere else, that's none of your business. That person is being triggered because it's reminding them of their own pain when they hear the child screaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how, a lot of what causes our triggers of how we feel, our negative emotions, it's for us as parents to find out what is causing that in us. What is it that is, what is my need that hasn't been met? What is the wound that's still open in me that whenever my child behave in a certain way, it reminds me of that wound, of that pain that I still feel inside.
Yeah. While you're talking, I'm even remembering why my parents, no, when my parents were out, if we were behaving differently than they wanted, we knew that they're gonna get mad, right?
Mhm.
I associate with that. And then I'm feeling like, they always told us they're gonna think bad of us. My mom would always say,
Yeah,
they're gonna think I'm not parenting you well, so behave, right?
yeah,
That's what goes through my head. If my son acts up, I'm thinking, oh, they're all gonna think I'm a bad parent, right? And then we start
yeah,
reacting to it. I just love it how you say it's a trigger.
yeah.
Because
And so ask yourself, right? When I think, and we all do it, when I think that somebody is going to think I'm a bad parent,
yes, I'm
what is
triggered.
that all about, right? What
Yeah,
is that all about? What is that telling you about yourself,
yeah,
right? You don't trust yourself,
yeah, yeah.
right? As a parent, you don't trust yourself. And that's why you think, oh, if they think bad about me, then that jeopardizes my own ability to be a parent.
Yeah.
But is that the truth, that I do not have the ability to be a parent? No,
But
right?
I love how you said the trigger. Like our behaviors are triggered by, it's so cool.
Yes.
So cool to think like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
You started homeschooling your kids, right? 3 years ago. I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to do it?
Well, the homeschooling journey didn't like happen overnight, right? Again, it started rolling in my mind, and when my oldest was in grade 2, he started disliking school,
Hmm.
right? Doing homework with him was becoming a struggle in the morning. Getting him ready to go to school was, it wasn't easy. And
Hmm.
so I wanted to understand, oh, why don't you like school? And he would say, oh, it's boring, mom. And, at that age, again, he couldn't verbalize exactly what was going on. So I even asked the teachers, because I had a great relationship with the teachers. And I said, he's not happy, right? He doesn't like going to school, right? Doing homework is sometimes painful to do that with him. And they are like, well, we don't understand because he learns very easily. He
Hmm.
makes friends easily at school. We have no issues with him. And they couldn't understand it.
Hmm.
So that was in the back of my mind. And eventually that started from grade 2 up to like before grade 5. He was going to have a teacher that I knew that he didn't like, right, that he had before for one of the subject. And I couldn't bear putting him through that, knowing that that would be his primary teacher.
Mm.
knowing that he, all these years he's been complaining to me about not liking school in the first place,
No.
right? So then I decided to take the jump and took him out of school. So I started homeschooling him first. And the reason also is I wanted him to thrive. And from grade 2 to like that grade 4 period, yes, he was doing what he was required to do at school, but he wasn't thriving in a way that he didn't feel good every morning
Mm.
when he got up to go to school. And that's not a way of living. And there's, when you think about the school, how many years your child is going to go to school, and if they are going to be like that, essentially it's not a good thing,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So then I really then trusted my instinct. My
Yeah.
gut instinct was saying take him out. And so I took the jump to homeschool him. And then a year later I decided to take the other two out as well. My middle one was more of a social person, so he
Yeah.
didn't mind school that much, right? Even if he started also showing the signs that, school was boring, school, like there's nothing exciting.
Mm.
But my younger one, from kindergarten, he wasn't a, it wasn't a positive
Experience.
thing for him to go to school. So then I decided to take the other two out as well. So it was a journey of like the universe was pushing me. And now looking back, right, in the situation that we're in today, I'm like,
Perfect.
I'm so glad I did this years ago, because I can see now how parents are having the
Problem.
challenges once they are, it wasn't by choice that they're being forced into it, how
Yes.
that can be very challenging,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Just you started early. That's awesome.
yes, I started early and I listened to my instinct and
Perfect.
followed that. Yeah.
Perfect. Mom, they say, right? Mom knows the best.
Yes, yeah. Every mother knows the best for their child. And I think if you trust that instinct, then you open the doors to possibilities, right? Instead of holding back and thinking the worst of things that we don't know how it's going to transpire, especially when it's something new. And which is normal, as a parent too. That was a fear of mine. What is that going to be like? Is my life going to be consumed with homeschooling? Because I know I had certain gifts in myself. I love working with people. I love teaching yoga. I love doing, RTT, and I love doing energy healing. Am I going to be able to still do that? And sometimes we let that hold us back, thinking that we
Mm.
can't. But I think if the desire comes from within, that, you're going to be guided and supported by the universe no matter what, and you'll be able to do what you're meant to do in this world.
And what's best for your kids.
Yes, yeah. And the kids are learning now from everything that I'm learning. I share that with them,
Nice.
right? And so they're not just restricted to learning the math, the English, which is necessary, the language, learning how to count, how to write, all that is important. But now they are exposed to other aspects of life, other aspects of what it is to be human, how they can, deal with their own emotions, because I think even that part of having emotional intelligence is a subject in itself that requires a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the things I want to talk about is the you've probably at that time going through, as you said, a lot of fears, right? Like what
Yes.
if that, what if this, right? In your head all the time before you did the jump, right? That's what's happening in a lot of people's mind, parents' mind right now, right after the COVID. What if I take
Right.
them out? How much commitment do I have to give? Do I have that kind of committed personality? Like all these guesses and doubts, right? Can you tell about, like, I wanted you have gone through this 3 years ago, right? So could you tell
Yes.
some of those worries you were?
I had lots of worries, right? And I'm, inherently, like, I used to be very type A kind of personality, right? And so I love structure. And, you know, when I put my mind to doing something, I was like, yes, you complete it from beginning to end, because that's what my upbringing, my programming, you know, what I was programmed to do. So there was a lot of fear because, again, just like we talk about the instant where if you're in a public places, what are people going to think about you? Are you a bad parent, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really in the back of my mind. Why if I screw up, right? What if I, you know, my kids do not succeed? And it's not about them so much. What is that reflection on myself, right? Meaning that now I'm not a good mother, or I'm not a good teacher, I'm not able to guide them. And so all of this was kind of like what paralyzed me, even when I started homeschooling.
Mhm.
And it caused a lot of my own pain on that journey. The first, I would say, you know, year and a half of my journey was very painful, because a lot of time I was faced with triggers from my own children. Because, you know, when you work with um, your children, yes, you're their mother as well. So they can tell you, they feel free to tell you what they're thinking, what they're
Mhm.
feeling, right? And that's why I think a lot of parents have to get used to that your children are going to challenge you in that way. And we want our children nowadays not just to shut up and do what I tell you to do. We want them to have a voice.
Yeah.
We want them to express their feelings, because we understand that by allowing them to do so, we allow them to be who they want to be as a person,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of that pain then comes from expectations that I had, what homeschooling should look like,
Yes.
right? That my boys would sit down and do their work from 9 to 12, and, you know, that everything is going to work out smoothly, right? And that, you know, by 12:30, whatever I've given them, they would have completed everything, right? And so that was an expectation. And when the expectation wasn't met, and on top of that, my children, you know, they were feeling emotionally about, you know, their work or whatever else is going through, that then triggered me.
Mhm.
And the triggered was exactly that. It was questioning
Your ability.
my ability to be a mom and to be a good teacher.
Yeah. Am I gonna fail them?
Yes.
Here.
So when I addressed that and I asked myself, okay, is that true? That, you know, if your child doesn't complete their work, right, daily within the period of time that you think they need to complete it, does that mean that you're not a good teacher or a good mother? And
Mhm.
the answer was no.
No.
And then I had to ask myself, well, where does that come from? It's
Mm.
because from my upbringing. I grew up, you know, in a Catholic school that was very
Mhm.
strict rules. My parents were very strict, right? And so if I didn't do things within a certain time frame, that I would get in trouble,
Yeah.
right? And so that was my same expectation for my own children. I had to change that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I had to, you know, do a lot of internal work on myself and soothe the part of me that needed the validation that I'm a good mother, that I'm a good teacher. And
Mhm.
that if I trust my instinct, right, which is the instinct anyways that pushed me to homeschool my kids,
Yes.
then, you know, everything is going to work out. And the reason why I want to homeschool my kids in the first place is because it is a collaboration. I want a collaboration. I
Mhm.
want us to work together so that I can support them into whatever they want to do, right?
Mhm.
What is discovering, what are they passionate about, what do they love to do, and encourage them to go for what they love to do. Because so many adults now are coming to me and say, I hate my job,
Mhm.
but I don't know what I want to do. I know there's something else that I want to do, but I don't know what. And then
Mhm.
now, you know, in their 30s, 40s, or even 50s, now I'm helping them figure out for themselves what is it that they love to do. But
When you can
yes, but imagine if we can
give the
encourage our children to go after what they love to do,
yeah, early.
how they would be when they are 30, 40, 50,
Yeah.
doing what they love to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
So
amazing. So amazing. One of the thing is also when you take your kids out, you probably, I don't know if you faced it, and right now it's kind of okay, but still goes through your mind, right?
yes.
Is what other people are gonna think. You're taking your kid out and they're going to be socially deprived. What are you thinking, right? We have that thoughts, right? I'm
Yes.
sure some of the parents watching this will have it too. What do you say to that? How did you handle it back then?
So exactly that. Again, it's about learning that, and that's one phrase I often say to clients is, what other people think about you is none of your business.
None of my business.
What's my business is how I think about myself. So if you're thinking about going on that journey of homeschooling, right, because you are being called to, because you see the events happening now on the outside, and you want to give your child the chance to thrive instead of being, you know, between walls,
Yeah.
right, and stuck in a certain way, then you need to ask yourself as a parent, why do I want to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And be clear with your why, because you need to remind yourself that, and I still do, you know, there are days, I'm not going to lie to you, where homeschooling feels challenging, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm triggered, then I have to go back and remember why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
What is that intent of mine that wants to homeschool my children? And what other people think, that's their business, right? They are not like me. You know, I have a certain need for myself and for my family or for my children, and I'm going to meet those needs for myself and also as parents, because we do have the responsibility to meet our children's needs. Then I think that's the better route to go. And
Mm-hmm.
by all means, if homeschooling is not for you, then you shouldn't do it. You should, you know, keep
Tradition.
your children in school, because that's what's going to meet the needs for yourself and for your kids, right? So always go with the why and remember why you're doing this for
Mm-hmm.
yourself and for your children, for your family overall.
Mm-hmm.
And and yeah, like I've been met with, you know, I had uncles who would, you know, in gatherings try to quiz my kids to
Mm-hmm.
see if they're learning, like, you know, the math properly, right? And so you're going to have people like that that are going to
Test you.
question. But I think they're questioning because they're wondering, is that possible to
Mm-hmm.
homeschool my own children?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people don't think it's possible,
Yeah.
right? And I always tell my kids that, I said, if you say in your mind, I can't do this, then you can't. But if you in your mind think there's a possibility to do this, I don't know how, but there is a possibility, then you open the door,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think people who maybe a little bit, you think they are maybe judgmental, but they won't, it's more like they're curious. How
Mm-hmm.
can you do this?
Yeah.
Because we've been brainwashed that we need to put our kids in school, and that's the only way for them to learn,
Yeah. So they get
right?
triggered.
And
They get triggered. They're like,
yes, they and understand, Kohila, that's another thing that, you know, on this journey I've learned as well, not only as a parent, but also helping people, is I talk about how one of our major needs as children is attachment.
yeah.
And we see any animal also, if a mother duckling doesn't have, a duckling doesn't have its mother duck around, that duckling can attach to
Mm-hmm.
another animal because it has that need to attach. And so our children also have the same needs to attach to us. They need to feel loved, comforted, protected. They need to feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
cared for, right? And as parents, we have that responsibility to develop that attachment, to bond with them, right? Because if we don't, well, guess what? And research have shown that the children will then attach to their peers.
Yes.
There's a great book called Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate that speaks about that. So, and that's why sometimes even when our children now go to high school, that we feel that now they no longer come to us to talk to us about how they feel or what's going on, right? And why is that? Why is it that they want to hang out with their peers more than with us? Is because in the former years, there was not that level of attachment that was required. And they tell you that even before the teenage years, because our kids go to school at such young age now, 4 years old, that even then they start to attach to their peers because they're spending most of their time with them instead of spending time with mom and dad. Right? So it's very important as our children are growing up, especially with younger years, to develop that attachment. And if you're considering homeschooling, well, what a better way to attach your children when you are there with them. You know, even with my own boys, you know, one of them is very sensitive. He gets very emotional, and I know where he gets it from. He gets it from me because I'm that type of person. So I'm glad that he's with me because now, you know, even if it's taking time, I'm teaching him how to see himself, you know, when he's very emotional and he's reacting from emotions, become aware of it. Right? And I'm not pushing him to do anything, but I want him to be aware when he's very emotional and he's acting from emotions. And I give him the space. I said, okay, you can express that, but you can go express it in your room, right? Because I have your brothers are here as well, but I give him that space. And then later on, I work with him to understand why he feels a certain way, right? For instance, when he play games and if he loses, that's a big trigger for him. Where does that trigger comes from? And we've uncovered it together. It comes from the sense of, if my brother wins, he's better than me. If he's better than me, then he'll get more love than me.
Wow.
Right?
Right.
And
they
so
have
now,
they have a story.
Yes. And now it's about, you know, telling him that, you know, and showing him, because as a parent now I have that responsibility to show him that I love him as much as I love his brother.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right? But see how the meaning comes very young. And so I wouldn't have been able to do this work if he was in school.
No.
And even when he was in school, he's actually, now looking back, his teachers used to tell me he has a tendency to be very influenced by the other kids, right? So he had already had that tendency. So then imagine now, as he gets older, if, you know, I'm not able to help him with that, how he would attach to his peers more and more and more. And then I would lose him by the time he would be a teenager.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, the emotional thing, right? If we don't work with them or see it, right? Sometimes if it's happening at school, they're not. You know, some especially boys, they don't talk a lot, right? Sometimes they don't feel what happened at school. They always say, "Oh yeah, it was a good day. It was a good day. Yeah, I had an okay day," or whatever.
Yes,
But
they
they
don't
don't go
express
into
it.
details. Like my son won't tell me a lot of detail unless I kind of ask him, you know, what happened then? What happened then? Where were you then? Right? Like that, right? So it's really like cool that if you are home, you know, these things happen. If it's not between your brother, even in social other places, if it happens, you're able to see it and work with it.
It comes up for you as a parent to see that.
Yeah.
right? And then when you see that, then addressing it, because, you know, I always tell parents, it's best to work with your child prior to becoming a teenager, because once
Mm.
they switch to teenage years, right, you can do the work, but it's going to be harder,
Yes.
right? Whereas the former years, you know, they are more willing to work with you,
Yes, yes,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, very. They're very and you also pointed out something that was very interesting is the suppression, right? When they're little, if you don't let them suppress the feeling and you work on it,
Yes.
it's way better. But if you let them grow and become a teenager, now they have these suppressed feelings as well and the attachment is another one.
Exactly, because, and that's why, you know, what is the number one cause of death among teenage boys? It's suicide.
Ooh.
And why is that? It's
Mm.
because boys, again, if we do not teach them how to express what they're feeling, and we teach them, and that's what I know, I grew up probably with this belief that little boys don't cry,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And how many of, you know, I know men in my life that never cries as well. Why is that? You know,
Yes.
we're all humans, we all feel emotions. Why do men do not express?
Mm.
Because of what we've been taught,
Thought.
right? And so I think most so nowadays, because of all the social media thing, um, and now how even, you know, past few months, people have been stuck inside, kids have been stuck inside. All they can do is um, you
Yeah.
know, see people from screens. There's not that sense that they can't share, they can't express, right?
Mhm.
And so it's very important to allow our children to express emotions. And like I mentioned to you before, a lot of us, you know, when our children are screaming or yelling, we are triggered by this and we are telling them, no, you need to stay quiet. But why do we do that?
Yes.
It's because we ourselves don't know how to deal with our own emotions. When we see our child screaming or yelling or expressing their feelings, now it opens our own wound, our
Mm.
own unmet needs, that void. And
Mm.
that's why we can't bear it. And we
Mm.
want to make them shut up right away, right?
Mhm.
We want them to stop. And
Yes.
it's because we are in pain.
Yes.
And so if we continue to perpetuate this, you know, this belief that, you know, you tell your children, no, you can't express yourself. You can't be angry, right? You can't be sad. You can't, you know, feel a certain way, or you can express it. Then what are we teaching them? We're teaching them the same thing that we've learned as children. And now that in adult life, why do we feel depressed? What is
Mhm.
depression?
Yeah.
It's, you know, when
Suppression.
we suppress emotions,
Yeah.
right? What is anxiety? It's fear, right?
Mm.
Fear
Mm.
of the unknown,
Yes.
right? And so why do we feel this way as adults is because, again, of what we've been taught as children and the belief that comes from everything that, you know, we've been taught or
Yes.
we've learned from.
Yeah. We're in a cool era of where we can actually understand all this. Like our parents didn't have this knowledge that we have.
Exactly.
So we have to make sure that we pass it, right? Every one of us has to take a very good, like a responsibility to make it
Yeah,
happen.
I think as parents nowadays, we can no longer sit back and say we are helpless because, you know, there's so much information out there. You
Mm.
don't need to even work with somebody that the information is on the internet. You can go and find it, right? You
Yes.
can read books. You know,
Yes.
there's been research that's been done that you can, you know, have access to. And but I think all of us have that responsibility to work on ourselves, what's causing our pain.
Mhm.
Because once we take that initiative and that responsibility to heal ourselves, because we can, then we no longer feel those triggers. We don't let the triggers paralyze us.
Yes. 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 Very
Do not blame our neighbor or the person or the environment or the circumstances
Mm.
for how we feel. We
Yes.
know that we can fix that by, in this science I've shown that everything starts with a thought. The thought causes the feelings causes the action that we're going to take, and the action that we take then manifests itself in our reality.
Mm-hmm.
Then if we want to change something that's not working, we need to ask, what is it that I'm thinking? What is it that I'm believing that's
Mm-hmm.
causing me to feel this way?
Yes.
And
Yes.
when I feel this way, right, then that's how I act. That's why I, binge on food when I don't feel good about myself, right? Kind of thing.
Yes.
That's when I become destructive. And when I do that, then how does my reality, what does my reality show me?
Yes.
Then I'm not healthy in my body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
all that, when we understand that we have the power of our mind and we can change the thought just by having that understanding where those thoughts and beliefs come from, so that we can choose better thoughts, better belief, then that's empowerment. And
Yes.
I strongly believe, Kohila, that we all have the potential to do it. It doesn't matter if we're women or men, if we're young or old, our race, where we grew up. It doesn't matter any of that. We all come into this world knowing that we have full potential to be responsible for our own happiness.
Yes. Yes. So true. Yeah. It's within us. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you when you started this journey of homeschooling, did you have to, like some people say, I have to sell it to my husband or I have to sell it to my wife? It was, you have to make a decision, right? Because he or her are part of that decision you're going to make. It's not just yours, right? Did you have
Right.
a Was he on board? How did that happen so our
I
viewers
was
can understand?
I was lucky enough that my husband was on board,
Yeah.
right? And he knew the benefit of homeschooling, but then he waited on me because he knew that I would be the one who would be doing most of that work, right? He could help out, but yeah, most of it would come from me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he was supportive in a way that he understood why, and that's what. And when it happened to me, it was basically the universe kind of pushed me because I was hesitating so much, and
Mm-hmm.
it created a lot of turmoil for myself when I was hesitating,
Yeah.
because I knew what my heart was telling me, but my mind again was having those fears.
Mm-hmm.
But then once the universe pushed me, then I changed that. I changed the what was going on, the fear and all that. And over the years, I've learned how to work with it more and more and more.
Yeah.
But
How do you
yeah,
think? How do you think? Let's say a dad or mom right now, right? How can they open up this? Even for you, it was good that he was on board, right? What would you say the conversation should be like so that they can have this communication, right? Clear communication, so they
I
can together make it. Yeah.
I think homeschooling or non-homeschooling, as parents, we need to sit down, both husband and wife, to ask ourselves, what is it that we want for our children?
Mm-hmm.
How do we want our children to grow up?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of environment that is? And what is that feeling when, for most of the times that it's working out for us? What is that feeling that we want?
Mm-hmm.
Again, so I think those questions, first of all, we need to, they need to sit down and answer those questions.
Yes.
And then, and because essentially, if it's important for you to be with your children and go on this homeschooling journey,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to find a way to make it work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think, but you have to want it,
Mm-hmm.
first of all. So I would say to parents who are exploring that idea of homeschooling their kids is to sit down and write the story of what you want
Yeah. Yeah.
for you and your children, and get the children involved too, right? For me, it was easy again because my children wanted to be homeschooled.
Yeah, yeah.
I never imposed that on them at all, right? And so, but some parents, they may have a child who is not sure about homeschooling, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to involve the child as well. And so that, there's input from everybody. And then from what everybody wants, what's important to the family is then finding a way how to make it work for you. Because we know homeschooling, it can be homeschooling, following curriculum, it can be unschooling for some parents, right? Letting the child learn whatever they are interested in. It can be having a tutor, having like a math tutor, perhaps, or an English tutor, whatever, coming to help out, right? And so homeschooling is not like school. It's not like everything fits in the box.
Yes.
The
So you can design it.
possibilities are numerous how you homeschool a child.
You can design it your own way.
Exactly. You're designing, just like you're designing your life,
Yeah.
you're designing your homeschooling, how you educate your children.
And their future.
Yes.
Yes,
Definitely.
that's where we want to go, right? Our children.
Yes. And how we empower our children to think for themselves.
Yes.
Right.
So open communications, have a conversation, get in line with alignment with your visions for you, for your family. And you said your husband knew that you're the one who have to do it. It was already ready because it's the way, the structure and working condition for your family, right?
Right.
That's also something, it doesn't always have to be the mom. It could be the dad, right? It's all depends on the structure. That's why the communication is so important. So the parent, one mom or dad doesn't feel like it's my responsibility, right?
Exactly. And sometimes, I've gone to parents where I tell my husband, I say, can you work with him with regards to this, right? Because I can't do it, right? For whatever reason. And, and he can step in. And so same thing, I know homeschooling parents that it's the dad that's spending most of the time with the children, right? And the mom is at school or working. So it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's different for every families. And what's the good thing is you do what feels right to you. And again, what other people think about you is none of your business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I like what you're saying there. Like, I feel like you're giving me a, blank piece of paper and a pencil or a pen and telling me to design
your life
with my kids and my, family as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, another thing is, if there is possibility, I know you can't speak for it, but there are sometimes the parents are separated, right?
Yes.
Then the decision is a little bit difficult because then now you have two households. How does that look like? That's another part.
Right. And that's why they have to sit down, both parents. And no matter what, and, even when parents are separated, again, if the communication is not there for whatever reason, that's the first thing that needs to be addressed.
Not homeschooling.
Right? Yeah, because you're getting ahead of yourself. And when you get ahead of yourself and you haven't set the foundation, then you're looking for trouble, essentially. And that's when you'll say, that doesn't work for me. It's not that it doesn't work, it's because you haven't set the foundation, which is communication between both parties, or all three parties, the children as well, is very, very important. And we have to hear what others, their perspective, where it comes from, and how we can work all of that together.
Yeah, and having a plan that's going to work, how that looks like is important.
Yeah, and having a plan and having a backup, because sometimes,
of course, life is, happens. Life happens.
yes,
Just
life
like
happens.
2020 happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. Whatever you thought would be unraveling the way it should now no longer applies. And now how do you go back to that drawing board and start over, and knowing that you can start over?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's flexible, right? Flexibility.
Yes.
So would you say your biggest challenge when you started homeschooling is probably your way of having those expectations, your high expectations, which stem from your childhood, which is not, it has to come into your own household, right?
Exactly. Because expectations is just a set of beliefs.
Yes.
You have a belief that things have to happen a certain way,
Yeah.
or you have a belief that that this person should
Yes.
be able to do this,
Yes.
which is very, it's not fair at all, right?
Yeah.
And
Would
it's
you
not.
say your boys' behavior and their motivation right after you started homeschooling? Did you see a big difference in it? I know he was struggling a little, so it must be like,
Yeah,
yeah, I
my
have no more school. It's out.
definitely my older one, when I homeschool him, even I have clients when I teach yoga, and they see him and they say, oh, he looks different.
Wow.
Yeah, he's so much more happier. And like just last week, I was with their godmother, his godmother, and she says, wow, like, keep on doing what you're doing with him, because just the way he interacts and he speaks and
Yes.
shows that he is in his element. He's
Mm.
learning so much, because we know once we provide the right conditions for our kids,
Yeah.
they're going to thrive and they're going to learn, and we don't have to impose the learning. And today, with my boys, I teach them to be independent, to do their work independent of me. Yes, I'm there to help them to
Mm.
understand the lesson, but when it comes to do their work, they do that on their own.
Mhm.
The older two, my younger one, yeah, he's only 6. I still need to be there with him.
Yes.
But yeah, that's what I want to empower them to be able to know what they need to do and do it by themselves. And if
Yes.
they need help, then I'm always here to
There.
help.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Important. Yes. Yes.
exactly.
Um, what what did you learn about yourself? I think we touched on that a little bit over the past 3 years of being a mom and a teacher. Do you separate when you're working with like now I'm a teacher, now I'm a mom, or
When I'm teaching, yes, I'm not a mom right now. I'm teaching the concept and I want them to understand the concept. But it's not like a huge, like I don't have to make like a big thing about it. And now, because they're used to me, they transition pretty well. They know, like, we start at 9:30 in the morning, and that's the time that school happens for us, and because that's what works for us,
yes.
right? So I've learned a lot about myself. This, I could write a book, or go days and days telling you everything that I've learned as a mother, but most likely about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding those triggers were key for me, and I'm still learning my triggers.
Yes.
I'm a strong believer that the learning does not end, right? Even if I'm very aware, even if I know a lot about how my past has affected me, and how I've overcame a lot of the things, there's still other things to uncover, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's ongoing until you leave this earth, I believe. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, for me, it's one of the major thing is taking responsibility for myself.
Yeah.
No, I no longer now blame my husband. And if I do, it's very short lived. I no longer blame the kids. And I take responsibility for everything that happens in my life.
Mm.
I understand that whatever shows up in my life is a result of, again, what I'm thinking, what I'm believing.
Yes.
And if I want to change what I'm seeing happening, then I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out where I'm not aligned with myself.
Yeah.
So I set up a practice in the morning where I work on myself every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's non-negotiable, because I like I said, my husband is not going to do that work for me. My kids are not going to do that for me,
No.
right? I need to do it for myself,
Yes.
because when I do it for myself, then I'm a better mother, then I'm a better teacher,
Mm.
then I'm a better, coach to everybody, and then I can help others.
Mm-hmm.
But until I do that work for myself, I'm no good to anybody else.
Yes. Well said.
Yeah, so that's the main thing, and that's a priority. And that's why I teach women, I teach parents how to balance life, right?
Yes.
Yes, you're going to be very busy, especially if you have your own business or you're at work for most part of the day. And now that you're working from home, I understand the struggle having to deal with your kids that you haven't been used to, right?
Yeah.
It's an adjustment period. And so with everything going on, because we can't just leave everything and do nothing, we
Yes.
have to do some of it. But how do you do it more gracefully? How do you do it with more ease? How do you handle those triggers is what's going to determine if you're very stressed at a level 10 or you're more at a 2 or 3, which is normal,
Mhm.
right? Which is more bearable, more easy for you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that comes with, understanding your own needs, understanding what is it that you need for yourself, that you need to do for yourself, and why, understand why, when you know what to do for yourself, why you don't do it,
Understand that.
right? Yes. And
Yes.
because once you understand again, and once you understand where that comes from, then you can change it. Then you no longer say, oh yeah, I wish, I could be like you and I could exercise because I know exercise is good for me, or do yoga, or take time in silence. Um, you're no longer going to give yourself that excuse, that whatever excuse used to come up,
Mhm.
because now okay, yeah, I'm giving myself an excuse because again, I want to feel like I'm not in control. But no, I need to remind myself that as an adult, I'm in control.
Yes.
And that's the truth.
Yeah. And you model that, right? When you do that work, you're going to model so much to your kids.
Exactly. And you know what I've started doing with my boys? Because I want to model that. I want them to have a practice to care for their bodies, have the time for themselves in the morning. So now every morning during the weekday at 7:30 in the morning, we go out for a jog. It's a very short jog, just 2 kilometers. The younger one, I either put rollerblades on or go on his bike so that he can keep up. But that's, I'm setting that foundation for them. Care about your body. And,
Mhm.
because they're boys, I can't tell them, okay, just sit down and meditate, because they're not going to do that,
Yes.
right? But eventually I hope, like, as they grow up, then I can teach them about meditation as well, and taking the time to fit that in early morning
Yes.
practice, right?
Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. That's um what advice would you give parents who are thinking about starting homeschooling or some alternative education for their kids, and what would you say they should focus on and what should they not focus on?
So again, it's about what I said before about understanding why you want to do it. What is valuable to you? What is important for you and your family? You need to get that in place. You need to understand what that picture is like for you. Because again, the mind, one of the rules of the mind is the words you say to yourself and the pictures you make in your mind is what affects you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is that picture you want to create for you and your family? What is it? What does that look like? So, if you are considering homeschooling, what is that homeschooling? What is the benefit? What is it that you're wanting to create while homeschooling your kids?
Yeah, yeah,
And
very.
be clear with that picture, because on that homeschooling journey, there's going to be ups and downs,
Yeah,
right? Not because I've homeschooled for 3 years now that there's no ups and downs. There's always ups and downs.
it's life,
But
right?
when you're down, that picture, that image, what's important for you, your why, you need to remind yourself. Otherwise, you're going to give up, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
you're going to say it's not working. But if you can remind yourself of, why am I doing this? What is that purpose that I'm working towards for me and for my kids, then you're going to pick up the pieces and you would want to do better. You're going to, because, the downs are just there to show us where there's still learning that has to be done.
Yes.
Within us and with our children.
Yeah.
So that's the advice. I would say, go to that drawing board and write down why you want to do this. What's important to you and your family? How do you want your kids to grow up?
Yeah.
And have that clear picture.
Yeah, it's very empowering because you have a plain, blank drawing board right now. You can create your vision, right? One of the things 2020 did for us, all of us, is this pause to think, reflect, restart maybe some of the stuff that weren't in alignment with us, right? Maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, because when we're in alignment with ourselves, then things flow easily. When we're not aligned, part of us, our heart says, I want this, but our mind is like held back. I always tell people, it's like your phone. How many times you get the update saying, or the phone saying, you need to update to this new version. And if you don't update your phone, what happens? It doesn't work, right? So we need to update our mind with those new sets of beliefs that's going to support what we want in our lives. We cannot function from old programming expecting different results, because the old programming is just going to reinforce the same results we've been experiencing for years.
Yeah, hold you back, right?
So that's what I would say to parents.
Awesome.
Go back and you know what, there's so many resources online. There's homeschool groups online. Go and read on them, right? Make it more familiar. What is that journey like for some people? And then so you can decide what would work for you, because again, the options are endless. There's not one way, there's not one curriculum. There's multiple ways, endless ways of using curriculum, different curriculums from, now we can get curriculums from here, Canada, from the States,
anywhere.
You can build your own stuff that you want to teach your child. If you are a parent who, say, a mother who knows how to sew, and you want to teach your children how to sew, you can make a course on sewing, just like you're good at math. You're teaching kids how to do math in a way that's fun, that's easy for them to learn. So learning doesn't happen just in a box or just in textbook. Learning can happen anywhere.
Yeah. My message is same too, like, skip the worksheet sometime, right? It's important. It's there for a purpose, but we should never be stuck with curriculums, or never be stuck, because then you're inside that box again, right?
Exactly.
But it's so easy to go there, because what do we know? That's how we got educated.
Because it's familiar. The brain, again, another rule of your mind is your mind likes what's familiar, and it doesn't like what's unfamiliar. Yes. So that's why it will always go back, even if, the habit is negative for us, it's not serving us, we still go back to it. Why? It's because it's very familiar. Right? Like in the morning you get up, you don't have to tell yourself how to brush your teeth, how to take a shower. Your body knows how to do these things better than your mind now. It just does it. So that habit is what we need to break. Those habits are not serving us. We need to, see how they're being affecting us negatively now. And then how do we break that habit? Again, it's about understanding where they all come from. What purpose did they serve in the past that, yes, you needed those habits, but now you no longer need them. And that's, rapid transformational therapy does that work.
And you don't want to pass that on to your kids.
No.
Because you already know it's not even working for you, or it didn't in a lot of ways, right?
And essentially, as humans, we can't help it. We're going to pass on certain things, But, as much as we become aware of what not to pass on, then, we don't want to pass that on.
Yeah.
But you have to become aware yourself.
Yeah, very, very, very cool. I want to ask you, you have 3 kids. One of the things that parents who have, 3 or 4 or 5 sometimes kids, it's
Right.
fear that, how am I going to teach them all? Like, they're all different grades, they're all at different levels, how do you balance that? It's a big responsibility, right? For a mom
Yeah. So
or
for
dad.
me,
Mhm.
I'll tell you how did that transition in. It's like, because I took my older one out first, so I was able to spend a whole year on him,
Mhm.
and also set how we're going to homeschool, like
Mhm.
him being independent. So, and then he was a little bit older because he was going in grade 5. So,
Mhm.
and he was able to, I could teach him, he gets the lesson, and then he would work on his own, right?
Mhm.
And so I was lucky enough that when I took the other 2 out, that the older one then already had that base,
Mhm.
right? So I didn't have to spend as much time with him. I would, yes, spend the time to teach the lessons that I needed to teach and tell him what he needed to do. And then he could be on his own. And so then I spent more time with the other 2.
Mhm.
And, I had them with me, and sometimes not with me as well. So we had a combination of where I would let them to be free to do what they want to do,
Mhm.
um, as long as they're doing their
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's different ways of working around it. For my boys, because they're boys, it's important for me to separate them. Otherwise, they come together, then nothing gets done, or they get into a fight, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I separate them, and they do their work on their own. And then at breaks, then yeah, they can come together if they want to. But those breaks are like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, you're finishing your work after 3.5 hours for the older ones. The younger one is faster, right?
Mhm.
Um, Afterwards, then you have all your afternoon to be together, to play together, and do whatever you want to do together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also know there are curriculums out there that teaches all like different levels.
Of stuff. Okay.
So they just have like different material if to give to your, say, kindergarten kids, and then they have a little bit more complicated material for your,
Great.
middle
Yeah.
grades, right? And so there are curriculums out there that addresses different age groups, and that you can homeschool at the same time, but they just have, different material that you
The
can give.
levels changes. The
Yeah,
questioning is in a
yeah.
different format. That
So
makes
again, there's, I think you have to go and do trial and error and see what works for you and your kids.
yeah. That's
And
it.
the great thing about homeschooling, if it doesn't work after 1 year, you can change it, right? You
Yeah.
can decide to do it differently the next year, or
Yeah.
even halfway down the road.
Yeah. It's flexible, right?
It's
That's
very flexible. Yeah,
you're designing it, aren't we? We're drawing
exactly.
the we're on the board. We got
Yes.
the pen to write it however you want. So it's empowering for parents, isn't it?
It is, yeah. If you really want to do this work, and I think it's going to be very rewarding in a way as you see your child evolve,
Yeah.
right? Not just um, in education wise, learning the math, the English, the science, and whatnot, but as a person, how do they, you can see them transform, and you can see them becoming their own self. And
Yeah.
I think that's very rewarding
Mhm.
as a parent, to see them being able to assert themselves, say what they think, how they respond to other people, to nature around them, and having a level of understanding that perhaps if you didn't homeschool them, they wouldn't have been exposed to certain things, certain discussions that goes on around mealtime even, or, when you are with them. And I think, yeah, that's the beauty of it.
So when you guys have lunchtime and stuff, right? Do the boys get involved and help? Do you get them to
Oh yeah, and my older son, he loves cooking. So I said, you know what? I give you complete freedom. And some days, if I move a client late in the evenings and I'm not able to cook dinner, he will cook dinner.
Nice.
Right. So, and they do help out. They make their lunches. I don't make lunches for them.
Mm,
They make their own lunches, and
mm,
I think it's great because then they choose what they want to eat.
yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
they have also, when things run out in the house, they put it on the grocery list.
Nice.
And that's their responsibility. If they want something and that they want me to buy it, then they need to put it on the list, right?
You're teaching
It's
them
not
a lot
just
of,
me.
yeah, you're teaching them a lot of life skills.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
already men.
Exactly. And cleaning, right?
Yeah.
Cleaning their space, around the kitchen is important. And sometimes, yeah, your kids are going to say, oh, but my friends don't clean. I'm like, I'm not doing this for anybody, but for your own good. Because when you leave the house, when you have your own place,
Yes.
right? Who is going to clean for you,
Mhm.
right? You want to be able to do it. And even later on in life, if you can have the help, or have your partner helps you do it, but there's, at least if you need to do it, yeah, doing laundry, you know how to do laundry.
Yes.
You don't have to wait for another person in order to help you,
Yeah. And you
right?
don't need to rely on another person, even if you're with someone, right? You always
Exactly.
be independent of doing your own. Those are very valuable skills.
Yes.
And that, and do they, like, do you guys have a structure on, sometimes parents feel like, one of the things that happened during COVID is that the kitchen is so close to us now than ever before. Like if we're at work or something, we had limited food, right? But the kitchen
Right.
pantry is just right there. We're just walking around the house, around the house, and going into the kitchen. So a lot of children had a hard time adjusting to that, because they don't know when to go eat, or when is my snack, then they're not hungry, right? So when
Right.
you're homeschooling, do you set a boundary on that, or
Yeah, because you know what? I don't want them to be like distracted by
eating?
food, right? And if I do see like one of them being distracted by food, and as I'm aware, right, I will ask, "Oh, okay, why are you reaching for food right now?"
Mm,
Type of things, right?
mm,
What is it that, why are you procrastinating and go in the kitchen and eat food instead of doing what you're supposed to do? And
mhm.
have that conversation with them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, they've just had breakfast, and not even an hour or 2 hours later, they are in the kitchen again. And so I don't want to, like, once in a while, that's fine, right?
Yes. Don't want to
But
become a
I don't
habit.
want to make this a habit. And that's when I ask them the question, and I make it clear to them. I'm like, in the morning, you eat a good breakfast. It's a healthy breakfast, so that you don't have to eat until it's lunchtime,
Mhm.
right?
Or
And
have a
so,
snack in between, but it
yeah,
shouldn't be something that they're going as a escape route, right?
exactly. Yeah,
It's not an escape to
it's
not.
not an escape. So, and yeah, and that's how, as a parent too, you can see those patterns, and you can, address them. What is it that is not sitting well with you right now? Maybe
Mhm.
it's something you don't know how to do, but you don't want to ask. And why do you don't want to ask, right?
Mhm.
Type of-
Did you, like, when you started homeschooling, one of the fear that people have is about socialization. It's a bit of a myth. I've been talking to
Yes.
many speakers, and I knew it too. It's a myth that they don't have socialization with people. You're going to keep them at home. You're just going to expose yourself to parents. And then when
Right.
they go out, how are they going to function? It's like, does that happen? I know you're.
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of communities now, there's a lot of homeschooling parents. And where I live now, there's a big homeschooling community.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can't even keep up with the amount of activities that goes on, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that's a false belief that, your children are going to be isolated. It's not. If you want to socialize with other homeschooling parents, There are definitely parents out there. There are a lot of groups, and you can go online and find these groups, right? They are available. So I don't think I don't think it's you can say that, you know, your child will be isolated. No, that's not true. There's a lot of activities going on. There's a lot of field trips even going on in certain places. Now, we can't do those field trips because of what's going on. But, you know, there's ways to socialize still with.
Look at us. We're so far. We're
Yeah.
connected, right? Right.
Exactly. And you know what? And for even, you know, when we go back to our children being able to do their own activities, you know, I know my boys before the lockdown, they were in competitive swimming, so they had their friends there, right? So it's not again that they're isolated, that they don't interact even with homeschool kids, because they still interacted with them when they're doing their activities. So yeah, I think that's a myth that, you know, they're not going to get the socialization that they need, because if that's important for you, you're going to find those groups and you're going to make the time for them.
Yeah. And there's so many, as you say, sports and other things that
Yes.
you can get your kids involved. And they're going to be with their age peers if they need to, right? So
Exactly.
one of the things that parents worry is that they're not going to be with the peers of the same age group, but it's not necessarily important anyway. And also, if you can give them in other sports, and you say you have so much support and you can't keep up with the engagement of home
Yeah.
other parents.
I
So
think the trouble now is we have too many things.
how to say no.
Right? Yes. So it's the opposite problem, I think, that we have, not that
That's
we're going to be
awesome.
isolated.
That is a big relief for a lot of us who don't know about that, right? About homeschooling. I just wanted to end with that you're a rapid transformational therapy practitioner, right? And a mom and a wife. What is your advice for parents who are thinking of leaving the traditional schooling and, you know, starting another alternative education options that are available?
Yeah, I think if you are considering that, then there's a voice within that's calling you to it, right? And if there is that voice from within that's calling you to it, then, you know, you need to look at it, because again, there's that, whatever you want to call it, your maternal instinct, your gut feelings, your gut instinct, your intuition, the part of us that knows better, right, what's good for us, is guiding you somehow. And you know, I would say explore it, do your research. um, yeah, and by all means, don't go and jump into it blindly, but do your research and see what is resonating with you. And if it's something that's really resonating with you and you decide to take that route of homeschooling, then again, you know, be clear about what is it that you want for your children, for yourself, and what is that life that you are going to start creating together as a family as you start to homeschool, because it is a journey.
Yeah.
And just like everything else, that journey can be a very enriching journey of where we become very aware and we learn about ourselves, and we allow our children to grow up the way they were intended to grow up. I think, yeah, that's I think the most rewarding part of it. But I think where maybe the fear comes from, where the doubts come from, where the challenges come from, are also very valid things to look at, because when we can address what's causing them for all of us, then we become a better person and we become more empowered now on that journey to create the life that we want. Because at the end of the day, when you ask everybody, right, what is it that you want?
Yeah.
And they all say, I want to be happy, right? And so what is happiness for you, right? And understand that for yourself. What is it that's going to make you happy? right?
Something we'll say is, I want my children to be successful, right? And what does that success look like, right?
Exactly, because when we use that word success in this world, a lot of times it's about thinking that your children needs to go university, and after university they need to land this job, not any kind of job, but this job that pays so much money, and then they need to get married, and so there's it's like we're building a box and we say you need to fit in that box, right? You need to do all these steps to fit in it, and when you fit in it, that's when you are
Successful
successful. But how many people have done it and still do not feel successful?
or happy, right?
Yes,
Not aligned.
it's not aligned. So yeah, so asking yourself that, what is it that success will look like for you? What does success means to you?
Yeah. Because
Right.
then when you define that clearly with all the knowledge we know now, right? Because in success in our days when we were growing up, our parents already kind of told us even, right? You need to be this or that, right? And
Yes,
as you said so many times, don't let that influence when you define success, because that is when you will become so high in expectation or low in expectation, either way, right?
exactly.
You got to find that balance and then work with your child's personality, because they are a
Yeah,
different person.
because that's why the mind and heart coherence doesn't happen, right? The mind think this is what success should look like, but the heart is desiring something else.
Yeah.
And then that dysfunction, that disconnection between the heart and the mind creates, the negative feeling that we experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learned
So
so much from you. You're just amazing, like how you put it. Even the word, like the trigger you say, right? And now I have a different way of looking at it. Like, it's
right.
triggering me. Why is that triggering me? Right? It's such a cool way to look at, how to react in a situation. My actions will be different.
Exactly. Because once you know better, you can't go back to
No,
the old self, right?
awareness.
So, yeah.
That
And
never
so when you can switch things and look at things differently,
cool.
then, you can transform in that moment,
Yes, yes,
right? And yes, transformation is ongoing. You have to keep working on yourself, but that light bulb can come up.
yep.
And you see clearly why you've been doing certain things for so many years, but now that you understand why, you're no longer a prisoner of it. You
Yes,
can choose to do it, but you probably won't, because you know that's not good for you,
yes,
and
yeah.
you understand why you were doing it then, but now you say, no, I don't need that anymore,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I can go on and live my life
Yeah.
freely. So many people have addictions. Like I work with a woman with a sugar addiction.
Hmm.
And it had nothing to do with, the food itself. It had to do with, having a childhood where she felt that she didn't matter to one of her parents.
Hmm.
And that was causing so much pain and was eating at her. And so
Hmm.
when the pain would come up, then yeah, she would reach for the sugary foods, because that's what the brain knew how to relieve herself of the pain,
Hmm.
how to bring that relief inside.
Yes, yes, yes. So much to learn, right? Like
So
so
much to learn, but
never
yes,
stop learning. Thank you so much for being in, you have given me so much things that I'm looking forward to implement with my relationship with myself, with my son, with my other kids, and and my husband, right? It's actually a work in progress.
yes, it is. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share
Thank you.
with you all of that journey that I've experienced myself, and all the learnings and the work that I do in the world today to help others also transform their life.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.